Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hi everyone, this is Mallika Pathak from Miranda House, University of Delhi, continuing with a course on conductance for BSc Honours Chemistry students and BSc with Chemistry students. This is Module 10, Lecture 1 of the series. The academic expert of the course is Dr. Amrita T. and the recording is being done under the DTH Swayam Prabha project of the MHRD New Delhi. Now let's recall what we did in the previous lecture. We took a look at transport number, transference number. We understood what is Hittorf's method using the Hittorf's theoretical device and took a look at the experimental setup of the Hittorf's method. Then two short numericals were studied to increase our understanding. Now in today's class, we will be taking a look at two numericals of Hittorf's method so that we can recall and revise what is Hittorf's method, because it's a little complicated method and our understanding should be very clear while working on the Hittorf's method during numericals. So we'll take a relook at two numericals of Hittorf's method, followed by a look at the moving boundary method for the determination of transport number and Walden's rule. So let's start with the course. Now this is the numerical that I was talking about. This is on Hittorf's method. A solution of silver nitrate was electrolyzed between platinum electrodes. Before electrolysis, 10 grams of the solution contained 0.01788 gram of silver nitrate. After the experiment, 20.09 gram of the anodic solution contained 0.06227 gram of silver nitrate. At the same time, 0.009479 grams of copper was deposited in the copper coulometer placed in series. Calculate the transport number of silver and nitrate ions in silver nitrate. Now, just to give you a revision of what Hittorf's method was, we first take solutions from the three tubes that we have, two vertical tubes and the one U tube. We take out the solution and analyze the solution before electrolysis. Then we analyze the solution after electrolysis. Because there are concentration changes taking place in the solution, the density changes and the volume changes. Therefore, all the measurements are done with respect to the mass of the solvent. And once we have determined the concentration before and after electrolysis with respect to mass of the solvent, then we find out the value of loss in concentration at the electrodes and divide it by the number of moles of silver or copper deposited in the silver or copper coulometer to get the values of transport number. So let's take a look at it. So we are given the concentration of the solution before and after electrolysis. After electrolysis, what we see is that 20.09 gram of the anodic solution contains 0.0622 gram of the silver nitrate. So we will first find out the mass of the water in the solution, which is the solvent here. Now this mass of the solvent is containing 0.06227 grams of silver nitrate. So we will find out the value of gram equivalent of silver nitrate in the solution. The molar mass of silver nitrate is 170, so we divide and get the value of gram equivalent. Now, with respect to this mass of the solvent, we will again find out the value that was there before electrolysis. Before electrolysis, 10 grams of the anodic solution contained 0.01788 grams of silver nitrate. Therefore, mass of water in the solution will be equal to 10 minus 0.01788, that is 9.98212 grams. Now 9.98212 grams of water is associated with 0.01788 grams of silver nitrate. So what will be the mass of silver nitrate associated with 20.02773 grams of water? We just apply the unitary method and get the value. Then we divide it by 170 to get the value of gram equivalents of silver nitrate in the solution before electrolysis associated with 20.02773 grams of water. Now after we've done this, we find out the increase in concentration of silver ions in the liquid solution. So we subtract the value of before, after, and get the value of silver ions in the anodic solution. Now we need to also use the value of mass of copper deposited in the Cooper kilometer. So we're given the mass, we just divide it by the equivalent mass and we get the value of gram equivalent. Now if no silver ions had migrated from the anode, the increase in the concentration of silver ions in the anodic solution should have been 0.0002981 gram equivalents, because gram equivalents of copper deposited in the copper kilometer is equal to the gram equivalents of silver deposited from the anode of the cell by the action of nitrate ions. But the actual increase was only 0.000155 gram equivalent. Therefore, what is the fall of concentration of silver ions around the anode? We subtract the value of 0.0001552 from 0.0002981. So we get the fall in concentration of silver ions. So what is the transport number? Transport number is equal to gram equivalent of silver ions lost from the anodic compartment upon gram equivalent of copper deposited in the coulometer. So we just divide and we get the value of 0.5794. Now if we want to find out the transport number of the anion, we subtract this value of cation from the value of anion. A solution containing 0.00739 grams of silver nitrate per gram of water was electrolyzed between silver electrodes. During the experiment, 0.0078 grams of silver was deposited in a silver coulometer placed in series. At the end of the experiment, the anodic solution contains 23.14 grams of water and 0.236 grams of silver nitrate. What are the transport number of Ag plus and NO3 minus ions? So, what is it that we do? We find out the values of silver gram equivalents before and after electrolysis for a specified mass of water. Now, mass of water before electrolysis was 1 gram. Mass of silver nitrate was 0.00739 grams, and we get the value of number of gram equivalents of silver when we divide by 170. Now for the 1 gram of water, again we find out the value of silver nitrate after electrolysis. So mass of water was 23.14, mass of silver nitrate was 0.236. So number of gram equivalents of silver in 1 gram of water, we get some. We divide 0.236 by 23.14 and then find it off on 1 gram and divide by 170 to get the number of gram equivalents. Now, increase in the concentration of silver ions in the coulometer where no silver ions had migrated should have been 0.078 divided by 170. So this is the mass of silver gram equivalent deposited in the silver coulometer. Now, increase in the concentration of the anodic compartment when silver ions had migrated is 5.992 into 10 to the power minus 5 minus 4.347 into 10 to the power minus 5. This should have been the increase. But that means instead of this, you are getting this. So what is the fall in concentration of silver ions in the anodic compartment? You subtract the value, you subtract 1.645 into 10 to the power minus 5 from 4.588 into 10 to the power minus 5. So you get the fall in concentration around anode. You know the silver deposited on the silver electrode was this much. You divide and you get the transport number of silver ions as 0.641. What will be the transport number of nitrate ions? 1 minus 0.641, and that will give you the transport number of nitrate ions. Now, let's look at another method for the determination of transport number. I have already told you that there are various methods available for the determination of transport number. The two that are there in your syllabus are Hittorf's method, that we have done it in detail in the previous e-lecture, and we've taken a look at the two numericals again in this e-lecture. Now, in today's e-lecture, we will discuss another method which is called as moving boundary method. Now, the moving boundary method rests on the direct observation of migration of ions in an electric field. It consists of a long vertical tube of uniform area of cross section A, which is fitted with two electrodes at the two ends. The electrolyte AX, called the principal electrolyte, the transport number of whose cation A plus is to be determined, is gently introduced above the solution of another suitable electrolyte BX, which is called the indicator electrolyte. The indicator electrolyte is subjected to three conditions. First, the anion X minus should be common to both the electrolytes. The cation B plus should move slower than the cation A plus. The electrolyte BX should be more dense than AX. Why are these all necessary? If you do not take a denser solution, indicator electrolyte, then it might float over the principal electrolyte. You want your principal electrolyte to be above the indicator electrolyte, and because if they are different in densities, you will be able to see a boundary. This boundary is very important because you are actually studying the boundary movement. This boundary can be studied by the difference in the refractive index of the two solutions. There could be sometimes a difference in the color of the solutions also. Now, on passing current between the two electrodes, A plus and B plus ions will move upwards towards the cathode, while the X minus anion will move downwards towards the anode. Now, that way the boundary between the two solutions is moved up, which can be followed by the refractive index measurements. Let us say that the boundary moves from AA dash to BB dash, that is length L, after passing the electric charge Q. Then the volume of the liquid which has moved is A into L. What is the concentration of AX in the solution? Let's say C. Then amount of A plus which is carried towards the cathode will be equal to C into A into L. What is C? C is number of moles of electrolyte per unit volume of the solution. So if you divide number of moles by volume and then multiply with volume, then you get only number of moles. The corresponding amount of electricity which is carried by A plus will be equal to C into A into L. Now let us suppose the amount of electrons passed is Q by F. Then the transport number of A plus cations will be equal to C into A into L upon Q by F. Now this Q by F denotes that the current or the charge is expressed in terms of Faraday. Now, one thing that I want to remind is that since B plus ions have lower velocity than A plus ions, they will never overtake the A plus ions, and therefore a sharp boundary is always maintained between the two solutions. However, there are times that B plus ions are never very far behind A plus ions, for otherwise the solution below the boundary would get diluted, and its increasing resistance would cause an increased potential drop, which will result in increasing velocity of B plus ions. Thus the boundary moves slowly in the upward direction. The measurement of the transport number can also be done over a range of concentration of the electrolyte. You can plot a graph of T versus root C, and it is going to be linear in dilute solution and can be extrapolated to root C equal to 0 to obtain the value of transport number at infinite dilution. Now just to revise what we have done, I want to find out the transport number of, let's say, H plus in the HCl. What do? I take an indicator electrolyte which has three conditions following. One, it has a common anion with HCl. Second, its cation moves slower as compared to H plus. In fact, with respect to H plus, all cations will move slower, but we have taken Cd2 plus. Third, the thing to be kept in mind is that Bx should be denser than Ax. That is, the indicator electrolyte should be denser than principal electrolyte, so that the principal electrolyte is floating on the top of the indicator electrolyte. Once that is done and you introduce them into the moving boundary experimental setup and you pass electric current, you will see that the boundary between the two solutions, which you can monitor because of the change in refractive index, moves up. Let's just say it moves up by a distance L. The concentration of the solution was C and the area of cross section of that vertical tube was A. then you can get the value of amount of A plus carried through the cathode, then that will be equal to C into A into L. Now if you had passed current equal to Q by F, then you can find out the transport number, which will be equal to C into A into L upon Q by F. Now let's look at the two numericals to have a better understanding of how to work with transport numbers. The numerical is calculate the transport number of H plus ions and Cl minus ions from the following data, which is obtained by moving boundary method using the cadmium chloride as the indicator electrolyte. The concentration of HCl solution is given as 0.1 normal. The mass of silver deposited in the coulometer is 0.1209 grams. The movement of the boundary has taken place by a length of 7.5 centimeter. The cross section of the tube is 1.24. Now what was the formula? LAC upon Q by F. We are given length 7.5, A as 1.24 and C as 0.1. Now if I am given the concentration in 0.1 normal, this is number of gram equivalents per unit volume of the solution, which is given in liters. So I will have to convert all this into decimeter cube. So what do? I take the value of LAC 7.5 into 1.24 and multiply by 10 to the power minus 3. C is 0.1. Now I need the value of Q by F, which is the amount of current passed. Now if I was using a silver coulometer and it deposits this much grams of silver, then I can find out the value corresponding to the number of moles. So 0.1209 divided by 108 will give me the gram equivalence of silver. Now this gram equivalence of silver corresponds to the quantity of electricity passed, so that is in terms of F. So 0.1209 divided by 108 we will substitute here and we get the transport number of H plus ions. We can also similarly get the value of transport number of Cl minus. We just need to subtract the value of H plus from this. Let us look at two more numericals for a better understanding of moving boundary experiment. The first is in a moving boundary experiment with 0.1 normal KCl using 0.065 normal LiCl as indicator solution, a constant current of 0.005893 amperes was passed for 2130 seconds. The boundary was observed to move through 5.6 cm in a tube of 0.1142 cm square cross section. Calculate the transport number of K plus and Cl minus ions. So the transport number of K plus ions can be calculated using the formula LAC upon Q by F. You are given the values of L, A and C. Q you can determine, you are given the value of current and time. So this will give you in coulombs. So the transport number can be calculated LAC upon Q by F. Now L into A is in centimeter cube, so you will multiply it by 10 to the power minus 3. That has gone into the 1000. The Q by F value you have to determine. So you have taken 0.005893 into 2130 and divided it by 96,500 to get it in Faradays. And therefore, once you substitute, you get the value of transport number of K plus. You can get the value of transport number of Cl minus by just subtracting the value of transport number of K plus from the 1. Another numerical, very similar, but it uses all the concepts that we have studied till now. A solution of 0.1 molar in LiCl with conductivity 1.06 into 10 to the power minus 2 Siemens centimeter inverse is placed in a moving boundary cell of cross-sectional area 1.17 centimeter square. It was electrolyzed for 131 minutes with a constant current of 9.42 milliampere. The Li positive was observed to move a distance of 2.08 centimeter. What are the velocity, mobility, transport number and molar conductivity of Li plus in this solution? So it is using most of the concept that we have studied in the past 2 or 3 lectures. Concentration is given as 0.1 molar, A is given as 1.17 centimeter square and L is 2.087. Now I is also given 9.42 into 10 to the power minus 3 amperes. Time is given as 131 minutes, so you convert it into seconds. So you have the value of Q by F that you can calculate using I into T upon F, and you get the value of Q by F. Now T plus will be equal to what? LAC upon Q by F. Again, very simple. You do it and you get the value. Now that you've got the transport number, you now calculate the value of lambda m. Now lambda m is equal to kappa by C. So you do the conversion. You have given the value of kappa, you have given the value of C, and you will multiply it by 1000 and you will get the value of lambda m as 1.06 Siemens centimeter square mole inverse. Now lambda m Li plus, which is that of the ion, can be found out using the formula transport number into molar conductivity of the electrolyte. So you are given the molar conductivity of the electrolyte, you multiply it with the transport number and you get the value of molar conductivity of the lithium ions. Now if you want to find out the velocity of lithium ions, so the velocity of lithium ions will be 2.08 centimeter divided by 131 into 60, and you get it in centimeter per second. So what is the mobility? Lambda m upon Z plus F. Lambda m is, we have got, we know what is the Z plus of Li plus 1, we divided by F and we get this value. We can make the necessary conversions here to get the mobility of lithium plus ions in the units that we desire. Now let's look at Walden's rule. Suppose I take an ion in solution and apply potential across the electrolyte. When you apply an electric field, the ion in the solution will start to move with a constant speed. Why has that constant speed been achieved? This is because you have two kinds of forces and these forces are balanced. What are the two forces? You have an accelerating electric force and you have a retarding frictional force, and these have become equal to each other for the ion to achieve the constant speed. Now what are the two forces? What are the values? The force is electric force, which is acting on the ion, and its value is given by Ze into capital E. Ze is the charge which is carried by the ion, and capital E is the electric field applied across the solution. What is the frictional force? The frictional force is given by Stokes' law, which is 6 pi eta Rv, where eta is the viscosity of the medium, R is the radius of the ion, and V is the speed with which the ion is moving. Now both of them have become equal, that is why you have a constant speed. Now we know that the ionic mobility is nothing but speed under a potential gradient of unity. So U is equal to V by E. We just rearrange this equation to get V upon E and we get this. Now let's recall the value of molar conductivity. Now according to the Colrush law, lambda m is equal to nu plus lambda plus nu minus lambda minus. We have also found out the values of lambda in terms of ionic mobility. So we just substitute here. Lambda m is equal to nu plus Z plus U plus F, nu minus Z minus U minus F. Just substitute the value of U from here into this and you get the equation lambda m is equal to Fe upon 6 pi eta nu plus Z plus square upon R plus nu minus Z minus square upon R minus. Now what do you see in this equation? That all these factors except eta are dependent upon the ions of the electrolyte. The only factor which is varying is the medium. The medium represented by coefficient of viscosity of the medium. So what we realize is that all this is constant and lambda m into eta is actually equal to all this constant value. So if this is true, then this should be followed for all electrolyte, but this is not followed by all the electrolyte. This equation lambda m eta is equal to constant is not followed by all the electrolyte. It is only followed by electrolytes having large ions or very large ions. It is not followed for electrolytes which have small ions. So why is that exception there? Why is it only followed for electrolytes which have large ions and not for small ions? Because what happens is, we've already studied, when you put the ions in solution, they get solvated. Now when you talk about ions which are solvated, their crystallographic radius is not equal to the effective radius. Now if the crystallographic radius is not equal to the effective radius, then you are talking about the crystallographic radius, but what the ions in the solution are actually doing is they are thinking about effective radius. So this does not come out to be true. The lambda m into eta does not come out to be true if you take small ions which are going to be heavily solvated. But if you take large ions, we have already talked in terms of alkali metal ions. We talked about cesium and rubidium. When we have large ions, the charge density is less. When the charge density is less, then the solvation is less. When the solvation is less, then the effective radius and the crystallographic radius are similar. So then lambda m into eta will be a constant. But if the ion is small, then the effective radius of the ion is going to be larger than its crystallographic radius and will be different in each of the solvent. Therefore, the amount of the solvent which has helped the ion is less with large ions, so the effective radius is more nearly the same in various solvents. Consequently, the Walden's rule is more accurate for larger ions and not for smaller ions. I am repeating, this lambda m eta is equal to constant only for electrolytes having large ions, because in the case of large ions, the effective radius and the crystallographic radius will come out to be similar and they will not change in the solvent. Whereas when you take electrolytes with small ions, they are going to have high charge density, they are going to be heavily solvated, and the effective radius and the crystallographic radius are not going to be equal. They are not going to be equal. Therefore, lambda m into eta is not going to be a constant for smaller ions. Now let's recall what we have done in the today's class. We have looked at the numericals related to Hittorf's method so that we could revise what we had done in the previous class. Then we looked at moving boundary method for the determination of transport number of ions in very much detail, followed by a look at the Walden's rule. So with this we wind up today's class. We are going to do applications of conductance in the next class. So with this, let us say bye to each other. Stay home, stay safe, take care of your family, and thank you so much. Bye-bye.